Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, 8th graders. Welcome back to another edition of United States History with yours truly. That's right, we're back here with Mr. Johnson, and today we are going to wrap up the Adams administration. And we're going to get into the election of 1800, and we're going to talk about its results. We've spent some great time talking about John Adams and what he's been up to. A very unfortunate presidency, but he did do some necessary things, and he also did some pretty undemocratic things. So let's talk about that. Okay, as a reminder, do make sure you're taking notes along with this. Feel free to pause at any time or slow it down on YouTube. So here we are in the election of 1800. And Adams is going to lose this election. Now, this is not going to come as a surprise. All right? He was a very unpopular president. Now, it's important to note that here's the thing. Even though he kept the nation out of war, all right, he lost the election. And everyone wanted to go to war with France at this time, or most people did, but Adams, like Washington, knew we were not ready. However, Adams lost the election before the news of the success of his 1800s peace treaty with France got back to the United States. News of that got to the US right after the election. So let's unpack that a little more. As we learned in the year 1800, Adams was successfully able to negotiate a peace deal and end this quasi-naval war with the French, with Napoleon. And this was a huge deal, and it was very popular. Because keep in mind, throughout the X, Y, and Z affair, throughout the Alien and Sedition Acts, the French Navy is still impressing our sailors and capturing them and raiding our ships and sometimes even shooting at them. That all ends in the year 1800, and people like that. This is a popular thing. Yes, people wanted to go to war with France, but Adams finally got the French to stop acting out against our ships. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the time, this news did not reach us until literally days after voting. Who knows? Many historians think that if they ever had modern communication back then, and like Adams would get this information tweeted back to him, perhaps that would have changed people's minds, and maybe Adams would have won the re-election. So what does this prove? This proves that Adams was right. He was right to keep the United States out of war with France because we were not ready, and he stuck it out, and he did what was unpopular but right, and he kept us out of war with this peace deal in the 1800s. So it shows that, again, sometimes doing what's right is not always the popular decision. And it cost Adams his presidency because people were very unhappy with the XYZ affair, the way he handled it by not declaring war with France or ending the war, and the Alien and Sedition Acts. But again, I just want to point out one last time, had this news about the success of Adams' peace treaty got back to the US before the election, perhaps he would have won his second term. And in fact, Adams was even quoted later in life saying what he wanted on his epitaph. Ooh, there's a vocab word. Do you miss vocab? Probably not. On his epitaph, which is of course the thing on his tombstone, Adams wanted to say, "Here lies John Adams. He kept the peace with France, and it cost him everything." Again, Adams is very proud of this. Yes, it stinks to lose the presidency, to be the first person voted out of office, but he knew he did the right thing. America was not ready for a war with France. It's a war we either would have lost or it would have completely bankrupted and divided us even more. So, way to go, John Adams. Now, Adams and the Federalists were very unpopular after the Alien and Sedition Acts. This is really the main reason why they lost the election, not just the war with France. I mean, Alexander Hamilton even wrote a 56-page editorial, basically an open letter, slamming John Adams. Let's get one thing clear. Alexander Hamilton, he's not someone that you want to piss off. I mean, 56 pages. That is a huge letter. That is an insanely long editorial. Nowadays, politicians just tweet like 240 characters and we're like, oh, mad shade, this is crazy. This guy essentially wrote a short novel dissing on John Adams. And a lot of people liked Hamilton. And keep in mind, Hamilton is a Federalist. John Adams is a Federalist. So we have some inner party bickering here, all right? This should be like if there was a Republican today who wrote a 56-page tweet dissing President Trump, which probably wouldn't happen because people tend to blindly follow politics now. But back then, Hamilton did not like Adams at all, and Hamilton said, you know what? I'd rather that someone else become president than Mr. John Adams. Okay, so that letter was very damning to Adams, who, again, Adams as president was basically the leader of the Federalists, but Alexander Hamilton, a much more charming and charismatic figure. So, I mean, must keep in mind, this is going to help Adams lose the election. Also, the fact that the Alien and Sedition Acts, which we talked about and you folks wrote about, very unconstitutional, a very dark time in U.S. history. Again, we can't think about it with our 2020 hats on. We need to go back to the late 1700s and understand just how much people in this country feared the French. Alright, how much the Federalists feared French influence. They were worried that French citizens in this country were going to rise up. So they thought they were doing the best that they can to crack down on sedition, to keep a handle on things. But of course, that is no excuse, and the acts were terribly unconstitutional. So they're going to lose this election. Now, what happens next? Well, the next two contenders are Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, and they actually tied each other in the Electoral College. There were other candidates as well, but these two tied for first place. They got 73 votes each. Now, this is pretty cool. Obviously, this has never happened before in U.S. history. And again, it shows just how divided the country was. Okay? Now, Aaron Burr would consider himself a Federalist, and Jefferson, of course, would consider himself a Democratic Republican or a Republican. Now, here's the thing. In the Constitution, if there is a tie in the election, the House of Representatives gets to break that tie by voting for president, and they voted for Jefferson. Jefferson barely won this tie-breaking vote. He won it by 1 or 2 points. And one of the reasons why Jefferson won is this man right here, Alexander Hamilton. Spoiler alert, Hamilton and Burr really didn't get along too well later in life. Aaron Burr is actually the one who ends up shooting and killing Alexander Hamilton in a duel. Alright, and Hamilton really criticized Burr for not really having any strong positions, basically kind of sucking up to everyone. And let's get one thing straight, Hamilton and Jefferson did not get along too well either. We watched some of the HBO videos in class showing Hamilton and Jefferson screaming at each other, and Washington has to break them up, like a couple of kids fighting on the playground. But Hamilton did admire Jefferson for actually having strong convictions. And at the end of the day, Hamilton decides to come in on Jefferson's behalf, thinking, you know what, what's best for the country is that Jefferson leads over Burr. And sure, a lot of that was probably some personal spite, but that's just the influence of Hamilton there. He's the one who decided to convince people to vote. I should note that Hamilton, of course, is not in the House of Representatives at this time, but he told people he was going to back Jefferson, and that convinced some people. And just think about this nowadays. The House of Representatives, now they got like 430-something members, and if there is an electoral tie in a presidential election, it would go to them. It would go to them. So Jefferson barely wins this. And you know what, folks? That's tough. If you win the presidential election, you want to win by a landslide because that shows that people like your message and you have a vote of extreme confidence. But Jefferson barely squeaks by, so it's going to be a little difficult. So this is, of course, a huge Republican victory. So far, we've only had Federalist presidents. John Adams, of course, who was a self-avowed Federalist, and Washington, who technically never belonged to any political party, but let's be real, the dude was a Federalist. Okay, much less partisan, to be sure, but still a Federalist. Okay, and this is a big deal. This is actually the last time that we would have any Federalist president. So Jefferson ends the Federalists, and we're going to talk later about how Jefferson immediately starts to undo the legacy of the Federalists. Jefferson hated the Federalists, okay? But he's going to be president now, and the Republicans are going to be in charge. Now again, all right, Adams, It's a tough legacy. It really is. He had to follow George Washington, which is insanely difficult. He kept up a lot of the same policies, like the policy of neutrality, like Washington, but because he wasn't as popular, it hit him back harder. And then we have the whole Alien and Sedition Acts. But, it's very hard for Adams. Jefferson was a much more popular figure. After all, Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, which is a big deal. So he's going to have a bit of an easier public relations time in office. Okay, let's talk about two precedents really quick. So, this is a precedent. First of all, this is the first peaceful transition of power from one political party to another. And note that I say peaceful. In many democracies around the world, there are coups or violent elections where people take over and another party gets in power. No, the world was watching America during this election once John Adams lost, and they looked at John Adams and they were saying, is this guy who is a Federalist, who still has power for a couple of months after this election, all right, he's a lame duck, but he still has power, is he just going to let this other party take power? And John Adams said, yes, I am. Keep in mind, this is a challenge that Washington did not have to face. Washington chose to step down, and another Federalist got elected. But John Adams loses this election. He could have maybe tried to become a dictator. He could have stayed in power and said, no, I disagree with Jefferson. I disagree with the Republicans. I'm going to use this power to stay in power. But he said, you know what? As much as I want to stay in power, I value this Constitution, and I should step down, even if it means handing the political football to my enemy. And actually, there were books and editorials written about it in other countries saying, look at this American democracy. Maybe it's worth something after all. A lot of people were skeptical and didn't think Adams would step down, handing power to a Republican. But he did. And you know what? That is pretty commendable. And this is, of course, something that happens all the time now in this country. All right? Democrat wins, gives it to the Republican, vice versa. And so far, emphasis on the so far, that's been a pretty peaceful transition, albeit, I'm sure, a very difficult one for the loser of the election. There's another precedent we're going to talk about. This precedent is the first time a president only serves one term, which is, of course, Adams. Okay? He's the first president to get voted out of office. He would not be the last. He is the first president to only serve one term. He would not be the last. And let me just say really quick, nowadays, in modern times, it's uncommon to have a one-term president. Normally, there are two-term presidents. In fact, the past three in a row, Obama, Bush II, and Clinton, were all two-term presidents. That's going to be unusual back here in the 1800s at this time. Most presidents are going to be one-term presidents because it's just very difficult to rule and there's lots of partisan politics, okay? And so Adams is the first guy to get voted out of office, which is really not a precedent you want to be known for, all right? But keep in mind, he followed his heart and he did what he thought was right by not going to war with France. The Alien and Sedition Acts, that's a little harder to justify, but we'll let history decide. Okay, so now Jefferson is in power, and Jefferson is a true revolutionary. Whoops, okay, how do I get these things off here? This is really messing up with my quote vibes. Erase, there we go. This is a quote from Thomas Jefferson. It says, if a law is unjust, a man is not only right to disobey it, he is obligated to do so. Okay? This is classic Jefferson, right? If the law is unjust, we should disobey it. Now, this is classic Jefferson for a couple of reasons. First of all, he was a revolutionary and he fought against the unjust laws of England. But can you think of a more recent thing we talked about where Jefferson was trying to disobey the law? Think about it. That's right. It is the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, which were written by Jefferson and Madison. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions basically completely dissed the Alien and Sedition Acts and said, hey, this is unconstitutional and states should have the right to not follow unconstitutional laws. All right, so Thomas Jefferson, he's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk here. When he was vice president, he denounced his own president and said the Alien and Sedition Acts are unconstitutional and states shouldn't have to follow them. So this psyche, this is classic Democratic Republican philosophy, all right, and also classic strict constructionalist philosophy. And Jefferson, of course, at this time is a strict constructionist. Okay, that's the election of 1800. What you're going to do next is watch these two videos, which will be on the website and in the email, and they're both from the musical Hamilton. Oh, I can hear the collective cheers that you're going to watch some Hamilton. All right, so the first one is about the Adams administration, which actually isn't in the original musical. It's one of the extras, and this is where Hamilton is talking about how much he hates Adams. It's going to show Hamilton writing that long, like 56-page letter dissing on Adams, and shows how Hamilton is going to have such an effect in the election. This next video is about the election of 1800 itself and also Hamilton's role. So I hope you enjoy those and I hope you sing along. After you do that and watch the video, you have an assignment, and this is your assignment. What is the legacy of President John Adams? Ladies and gentlemen, it is a loaded question. There are many different ways you could take this, all right? I want you to use everything we've talked about with Adams. There was the Adams Review that you read, the sheet on the Alien and Sedition Acts. Your textbook has information on him. These past videos, all right, that I've been filming for you. What is his legacy? Here's the thing. It's up to you to decide. Was it more positive? Was it negative? Was it in between? As long as you back your stuff up, there you go. Now, we're not doing APA citations with this one, so you're off the hook, all right? But you need to have at least 10 quality sentences, all right? A quality sentences is not, John Adams was president. John Adams was president between this year and that year. Yes, those are two sentences, but those are not quality sentences on their own. I really want to encourage you to be more detailed in your answer for full credit. Just because you write 10 sentences does not mean it's going to be detailed enough and does not mean you will get full credit. Okay? So this is kind of our final review on Adams. It's not going to be as in-depth as the Washington essay. I'm not asking you to write a 5-paragraph essay, although if you really get into it, absolutely, go for it. Okay? But this is not going to be as in-depth. You just need to decide for yourself what his legacy is, and you need to show your examples. Now keep in mind, if you talk about something, make sure to talk about it in detail. Alright? Don't just mention the XYZ affair. What is the XYZ affair? You should be writing this for someone who has no idea what you're talking about. So forget that I'm going to be the one grading these, alright? Explain it. Don't just mention the Alien and Sedition Acts, for example. Talk about them. Okay. Now, back up your answer with specific details, like I just said. And if you're having a hard time answering this question of what is the legacy of John Adams, well, here's another way to think about it if that wording is a little difficult for you. Was John Adams a success? Or was he a failure? And why? Or was he somewhere in between? When we look at legacy, that's kind of what we're talking about. Is his legacy one of success or one of failure? Maybe somewhere in between, and why? So that is how you're going to back that up. Okay, so I hope you understand this assignment. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Now, again, I said this is not as in-depth as the Washington essay. That's because this is going to be due at Teams on 3 o'clock on Tuesday. So you have less time to do it, and I'm not expecting a huge long essay for that. You need at least 10 sentences. You might need to use more as you discuss the Adams administration. So best of luck on that, ladies and gentlemen. I can't wait to read these. And then after this, I am so excited that we get to go and dive into the Jefferson administration. It is extremely exciting to talk about. We're going to talk about everything from pirates to Napoleon and everything in between. It's going to be a blasty, ladies and gentlemen. So good luck on your homework, and I can't wait to read those on Tuesday afternoon. Peace out.